Now, we've been discussing the art of complaining this morning. The Institute of Customer Service says the number of people complaining about service issues with organisations has risen to its highest level since 2008. Now, you've been getting in touch this morning and telling us about the complaints that you've put in and the best way of going about it and the results that you've had. But what's it like being on the receiving end of those complaints? Well, there's a course for that. Matt Reed is a corporate trainer in customer services at Gerald Training in Norwich. Matt, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Chris.
What do you make of this news this morning, then, that this is according to the Institute of Customer Service, that complaints now are at their highest level since 2008? Does it surprise you? What do you put it down to?
Yeah, no, it doesn't really surprise me at all. It's funny, really, because as a training centre, we've definitely noticed a significant demand for bespoke complaints handling training and also customer service training over the last couple of years. I think the pandemic has played a massive part in that, really. I think companies are being forced to streamline, making cutbacks, and looking at more efficient ways to work. And as a result, it's definitely had a knock-on effect to overall customer satisfaction. I think also that with the use and the increase of social media, it's just far more easier to make complaints nowadays.
Yeah, so from a company's point of view, what advice do you give? The old adage is that the customer is always right. So if you get a complaint, should you always try to meet it halfway and placate that person?
I think it's always very important to do what you can in order to resolve the issue. But I think it's got to be a two-way street, really, because I think consumers nowadays have greater and higher expectations than they've ever had, really. And I think it's been about being realistic with your expectations. I do believe that companies are doing everything that they can to resolve an issue, but I think sometimes it is a case that you're going to have to make a compromise somewhere along the lines. And looking sometimes to resolve an issue to make it best for everyone is not always easy. But having clear policies in place, having clear procedures to deal with complaints, I think is also just as important. And making sure that that everyone's happy with the outcome.
Yeah. What about if you're working for a company and you feel that the customer is being unreasonable and that their complaint is not really one that you should act on? That's where you can get into a little bit of a to and fro, isn't it? Which presumably you would advise people to try to avoid.
We definitely try. Yeah, I mean, it is a case that, like you just mentioned a minute ago, is the customer always right? And I think nowadays there are times to know the customer isn't always right because the customer may have unrealistic expectations. So as a customer service advisor, you are trying to meet the needs of the customer as much as you can. But there are times, and we do it on training courses, where we are teaching people when they can kind of push back, or when it's okay, it's acceptable to kind of say no. If you've done everything you can to resolve the issue, the customer's still complaining because they just want to complain, and it does happen when people are just venting their frustrations, taking it out on a customer complaint handler, then there are reasonable times where you have to say, well, we've done everything that we can, and we've met, we tried to meet the customer's expectations. They're unrealistic. We have to draw a line somewhere, and I think it's okay to do that.
Now, Matt, I might need a little bit of live practical help from you here, if that's okay, because inevitably, while we've been talking about this, we've had a complaint ourselves. Do you mind if I share this with you?
No, that's fine, yeah.
Message that's just come in this morning. It says, physical and verbal abuse against retail workers is at an all-time high. Fact, says our texter. Yeah, we've actually covered that as a story before, which is definitely not a good thing. It says, I work in retail and on a daily basis have to deal with customers who feel it's okay to abuse retail workers. I'm appalled that listening to Chris Goreham this morning, there you go, this is the complaint, Matt, you are actively encouraging people to complain in shops, restaurants, etc. Things go wrong, and at the retailer I work for, we always try to resolve the situation or issue the customer with the minimum of fuss. But some people complain about things when, to be brutally honest, it's either a problem they themselves have created or there's simply nothing to actually complain about. People's mental well-being is a massive issue at the moment, and for you to actively encourage people to complain, usually for no reason, will just make the issue worse. Every company will have policies and procedures in place to deal with things if they go wrong, but if customers don't hear what they want to hear, it's most inevitably they will verbally abuse staff. Don't encourage the public to tell their best results from complaining, because there are far bigger issues that raises. So there you go, Matt. That's the message that we've had. had. So how would I deal with that? I would say that we've approached this from both sides. We've had from people who have complained, and in your case, we're hearing from those who get complained too. So how do I best deal with that complaint then, Matt?
I think it's all about perspective, isn't it? I mean, that's a very fair comment to be made, and I think when day in day out that you're on the receiving end of complaints, particularly if you're feeling that you're being abused, then I think that it's fair enough to say that people have enough of that, and it's an incredibly difficult job to be in as well when you're receiving endless complaints through and through. But again, I think from your perspective, Chris, what you're doing this morning is you're just looking at trying to get an all-round perspective from both sides, aren't you? You're looking at, people. I think companies can't improve their services and what they do unless they know the areas that they need to be improving in. And of course, complaints have a negative connotation, but often when we're training this, I talk about complaints are essentially just feedback, and feedback can be taken in different ways. So I think we always encourage companies to thank the customer for the complaint, because in a way, what that customer is doing is notifying you of areas that you can improve on. So it doesn't have to be a negative thing. I think the issue lies in the way that people go about complaining. If you're going to take out your frustrations, if you're going to shout, swear, be abusive towards someone, then you can't really be expecting to get much help in back. But I think if you do it through the proper channels and like that particular response that has come through, if you do look at a company's website, if you do check out their policies and procedures, if you do it in a polite manner, then you're far more likely to get a better result anyway. So regards to answering your question there, I think really you are just, from a consumer perspective, you're trying to get a full perspective here this morning about the best way to encourage people to give feedback, but equally from an organisation's perspective, the best way to deal with that feedback.
And I've got to say, Matt, from everyone we've spoken to this morning, and judging by the messages we've got on text, the best results have been from the people who've been calmer and perhaps emailed later or gone about things through the proper ways. Everybody who's told us about a good result they've had has been that way.
And I think that sends a really positive message, quite frankly, in as much as that says it all, doesn't it? If people have had the best results by staying calm, by communicating clearly what their expectations are, but being realistic with them as well, rather than just going off the handle, rather than being abusive and taking all their frustrations out on a customer complaint handler, they're getting better results. So I think really that message says it all. The best way to deal with a complaint is, you do have a right. If you're not happy with the service or a product, then of course, there are channels in which you can do that, but do it in the right way, rather than just trying to aggravate everyone. Because as soon as you start taking those frustrations out and you upset someone, then, I know if I was on the receiving end of that, then that's going to be quite challenging for me to then try and give the best service back.
Matt, wise words. Thanks for joining us. Matt Reed, corporate trainer in customer services at Gerald's Training in Norwich.